Let's Talk Native is produced at the LTN Studios on the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. We break all the rules for Native media by peeling back the layers of assimilation and indoctrination. No prayers, no buffalo speeches, and no spirituality shows. While this podcast does not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment, we do take a tough look at history, oppression, and our survival. But the real goal here is to bring our people together by breaking down what separates us. So, welcome to Let's Talk Native with John Kane.
Say hello and welcome to our 501st episode of Let's Talk Native. We are changing some things up a bit, so I'm going to use this program to reintroduce myself. I know many of you have been listening for a while. Some of you may be relatively new to the podcast. So let me take this time to reintroduce who I am, what we're doing here, what you can expect, and what the new format's going to look like. Well, first off, I'll start there. We are now going to do 3 podcasts a week that are 30 minutes long. So we're going to try to address issues, compact them a little bit. We're still going to have guests, but we're going to have half-hour podcasts. And we're going to try that for a while, see how it works out. Hopefully this enables people to, maybe hang with us a little bit longer, make sure they listen to a full podcast instead of getting about halfway through and finding something else to do with themselves, I guess. We've been doing this for a while. Like I said, we went through 500 episodes, and that doesn't even include some of our early shows that we're doing on commercial radio and some of that. So we've been doing this for a while, and we cover a range of topics, and we're going to continue to cover that range of topics. Some issues that we've talked about in the past, we do need to circle back around to, and we've got to revisit them. So we've talked about racism, environment, climate change, missing and murdered Indigenous women. We've talked about gaming and gaming law, land claims, land use, land back. We're gonna go back to a lot of these issues. We've talked about court rulings, and we've talked about legislation that was either anti-Native legislation or supposed to be pro-Native legislation. We've talked about issues on either side, the Canadian side, the U.S. side, provincial law, state law. And we're going to do a lot more of that going forward. But I think it's really important that people understand what we're trying to do here. Often what I'm trying to do is present something that isn't what you've heard elsewhere. I'm not trying to be the lunatic fringe necessarily, but I'm also trying to defy a little bit of the conventional wisdom. That's the goal here. The goal here is to talk about things that you haven't heard before. And maybe, and my hope is that some people will hear something and say, I've always thought that, but I've never heard anybody talk about it before. So that's what the goal is. That's what the goal of Let's Talk Native is, coming from me. I would like to think that I'm more on the traditional side, and that oftentimes gets pitted like progressive Native person versus traditional Native person. I think I'm pretty progressive as well, but I'm not progressive in the sense that I feel like I've got to condition myself to assimilation and indoctrination. I take a more pro-sovereignty standpoint, a more direct attempt at maintaining our autonomy and our distinction. I do shows just talking about that, and we will do some of those things going forward. I think it's important that people understand who I am. I am Gunyagahaga, what most people know as Mohawk. I live, and we actually do the show here on Seneca territory, on the Seneca Nation territory of Cattaraugus. We're able to do this because we do have support from Senecas. Ross John provides the space for us and sponsors the show through his companies with he and his wife, Ross and Holly John, and the RJE family of businesses. I'm also sponsored by Eric White, who is also a Seneca business person. And we get some financial support from Grand River Enterprises as well. We also get support from people who just listen to the show, might send in a donation, folks like Cindy or Ed or and others. A lot of the folks who listen to us in various places, including New York City, where we do a radio show as well. So we get support from a range of places too that enable us to keep up with equipment, pay for the services that we need to pay for online, for podcasting and all of that stuff. So that's who I am. I'm a Mohawk from Gunawaga. My wife's Oneida. We live here in Seneca Territory, and this is where the LTN studios exist. And I work with Jake Proud, who is our studio engineer and helps do the video work. He's a videographer and a sound technician. Helps solve a bunch of problems, some that I get that I stumble into, and some that just occur because of the world that we live in. Look, we do a radio show as well. It's not Let's Talk Native, it's Resistance Radio. And there we are meeting the challenges of the global pandemic, where we're trying to do remote audio feeds or broadcasts to the stations in New York City and Washington, D.C., on WBAI in New York and WPFW in Washington. So we've got challenges, and we usually work our way through them. We do appreciate any feedback. So if there's an audio problem, something that you wish that we would address a little bit more clearly, then we appreciate feedback, even if it's constructive criticism, as long as it's constructive. So we appreciate feedback. We also appreciate feedback if somebody has a topic that they think perhaps we should address or go further into. We cover a lot of issues, and there's always a lot to talk about. Look, I got to admit, there's some days that I come into the studio and I haven't decided until I sit down in this chair in front of the microphone, in front of the camera, to decide what we're going to talk about. And these spontaneous conversations sometimes make good radio, good podcasts. And other times we're trying to figure out what the newest thing to talk about is without trying to mow over the same grass that we've done perhaps several times. But as I said before, there's good reason to circle back to some issues. So whether we're talking about the gaming issues that the Seneca Nation has with New York State, or whether we're talking about the latest line of resistance that we're putting up for a pipeline or for land encroachment or whatever. Some of our relationships with, that's come to be during this global pandemic with Black Lives Matter and some of the other social justice issues. We are going to circle back around with some of this stuff because there are new issues to present. There are new perspectives oftentimes. Sometimes we can bring in a guest that will offer something to us that we haven't considered before. So I ask you to bear with us, even if you hear a show that perhaps covers a topic that you've heard before. Give it a listen. We're only half hour long now, so it's not a big imposition of your time, and you might hear something new. You may hear something that reinforces something we've talked about before. The mascot issue is an issue that I've spoken a lot about because of some of the battles that I've been in here in the local area in Western New York and back where I went to high school in Eastern New York, and of course I participated in some of these conversations and Zoom calls and I've traveled to other school districts to speak in front of boards of education. So we will revisit that from time to time. And that also seems to be a moving goalpost. We've had some success with the Washington football team changing its name or dropping its name, the Cleveland baseball team dropping its name. So I think there's reason for update and for sometimes, look, we aren't always gaining ground on some of these things. So I think as we perhaps we lose a little bit of ground, we've got to readdress some of those issues as well. I also want to talk about what you can expect from not only this show, and I've talked about some of the things you can expect. Again, more of perhaps a stronger stance on some of the issues that we've talked about. Not necessarily anti the United States or anti-government, but I do want to hold them accountable for not only their historical injustices, but the injustices that we live with today. Sometimes we have a tendency to compare the oppression that we experience today with the oppression of the past and say, it's not that bad. Well, just because they're not killing us in the street and digging holes and throwing us in mass graves doesn't mean that genocide doesn't continue. And that's why we need to continue to address it, because even as some of the means by which they attempt to make us less relevant or insignificant, then even as those methods change, I think it's important that people understand them. And that's why we talk about things like mascots. That's why we talk about things that this politician may have said or that politician may have said, or the policies that Native politicians have a tendency to adopt that still pushes in a direction of of indoctrination and assimilation. So we're still going to address those issues. Now, we are a podcast. Primarily, that's what we do here. We produce an audio podcast, and there'll be three a week. We'll release one on Monday, on Wednesday, and on Friday. And they'll probably get released around 10 o'clock. We may fluctuate with the time if it makes sense. And again, we'd appreciate some feedback on that. So that's what we're going to do with Let's Talk Native. Now, in our Let's Talk Native studios, we're still going to produce short form videos. We have a couple of directions that we're moving towards in terms of more full-length documentary work. And of course, we're going to, on occasion, do some live streams. We were doing that primarily before, but because of internet capabilities and the like, we find recording is a little bit, it gives us more flexibility. So, but we will do some live stream events and live, perhaps Zoom events or whatever else going forward. But we'll do those kinds of things as well. But we're going to continue to do the video work. We're going to continue to do the audio work. And of course, as I said, we do 2 radio shows under the name Resistance Radio with my co-host Regan DeLoggins. And I do encourage people to check out our podcast. Our podcasts are Let's Talk Native. And you can find that you can ask your smart speaker to play the Let's Talk Native with John Kane podcast, and it'll come right up. You can go to any of your favorite podcast platforms and search for Let's Talk Native and find it. But you can also look for Resistance Radio with John and Regan. And if you and there you can find the shows that we are doing, and these shows are broadcasting both in New York and in Washington, D.C. Now, you can go to our website, and our website is letstalknative.com. There we have links to a variety of things, and we've got a photo gallery, we've got some the videos. We also have a PayPal tab, so if you want to make a donation to the show, you're welcome to do so. We have a Patreon account, so for those who want to subscribe and become a member of our Patreon team, for those who sign up for that, we'll offer some exclusive content, audio, maybe some video, I don't know, audio, or at very least we'll offer some content that you will get to see before anybody else or hear before anybody else. So we can always use the help. The more resources we have, the more that we can do. We're pretty much a two-man team, but we've been building out our capabilities every step along the way, trying to do more, trying to adjust ourselves to what is what's contemporary. I understood at a time we were doing a 2-hour show. We broke it up into 2 1-hour shows. But as we've looked at how content is listened to or viewed, people are looking for the smaller the smaller bite-sized pieces. So doing 3 half-hour podcasts might make a lot more sense for people. It'll give us opportunity to address more issues, perhaps be a little bit more concise as we address them. And if we do have an issue that requires more than a half hour, we'll extend it into a 2-part series perhaps, or a 3-part series if need be. So you won't be missing out on anything. You'll have an opportunity to catch a show 3 times a week. And of course, if it's a podcast, you can listen to it anytime. So it's on demand content. And I do encourage people, by all means, don't be afraid to look back into our past shows. There are many good programs that we've talked about, a lot of different issues. I say the same thing about our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. So I encourage you to subscribe to our podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel. But if you go through our YouTube channel, you're going to see, yes, there are videos of our shows, but there's also short form videos that we've done. Some of them have been pretty hard hitting. We've talked about racism. We've talked about the mascot issue. We've talked about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the doctrine of discovery, Columbus and the myth associated with him. We've addressed a lot of issues, gaming issues. I've made some direct appeals to politicians over the years, and some of those videos have been hard hitting, and frankly they've been shared widely. One of our videos talks about the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act has been used as a teaching tool for at university for to teach about the Indian gaming laws. So we are providing some content. We hope it's going to be used. We do encourage people to share the content, not to pirate it, but to share the content, share the videos, share the audio, share the podcast, and again, we look for your feedback. And there are many ways you can give that feedback. You can follow us on Facebook, where we also play our videos on Facebook. So we can look for Facebook comments and direct messaging there. You can add your comments to our Twitter feeds, which is, again, Let's Talk Native. You can add comments to our YouTube channel. And I do go through those, and I look for those comments, and I either reply if there are comments that warrant a reply, or take what I'm hearing into consideration. So all of those things are the things that you can do to participate in what we're doing here. But I will say that one of the ways to participate is to support the program. So I encourage you to go to Patreon. You can make a donation via PayPal, as I said. And if you go to our website, you can also find, if you want to send a check snail mail, you're welcome to do that. As I said, the more resources we have, the more that we can do. And there is a lot to be done here. The fact that we've been doing this for over 10 years is just an indication about how many issues there are that present themselves from time to time. And some of those issues change. That's why, again, we have to circle back sometimes. The issues change because the players change. Sometimes when we're taking on issues with the state, we have a change in the administration there. And look, we've been doing some of this stuff since back when David Patterson was the governor. We've seen changes in administration, in Washington from Bush to Obama to Trump, and now to Biden. So the opposition team changes up quite a bit, but our team's changed a little bit too. So the Native leadership changes. We see the disposition of some of that Native leadership change from time to time. So it is important that we revisit some of this stuff, because one of the things that I'll also say that I'm not afraid to do here is take on our own people. When I see that we have Native leadership that I think is advocating the wrong direction for our people, I'll speak out against it. We've had guests on that have talked about any number of things, including some of the challenges they have in their territories when some of the activist community finds themselves at odds with tribal governments or band councils or the like. And these are the kinds of things that we need to discuss. And it's important that people understand that in order to continue to be who we are, we have to stay engaged. We have to stay involved. We all have to be activists. We all have a responsibility. One of the things that I've talked about on the show before is the idea of rights, Native rights, and that oftentimes gets talked about in the absence of the responsibility that goes along with having those rights. Some and many that I support would suggest we don't have rights; we have responsibilities, and because this isn't about something that is given. We have a responsibility to carry ourselves and carry our families and carry our communities. But we also have a responsibility to educate. We need to educate ourselves, which means we have to take a look at the world around us. We have to understand the challenges that we face. But we also have to understand the difference between an ally and somebody who is just merely appropriating something from us. And look, there are solid allies out there. There are people who we can depend on who may not be Native. But there's also, there are plenty of people out there who pay a lot of lip service, and they endear themselves to us only to find out that, that there was an alternative agenda involved. So I think the idea of being diligent is part of the reason we do this show. I do promote a certain level of skepticism. I think we do need to be critical thinkers as we look at the decisions we make today that are going to affect our future. I think we have to try to plan for the unintended consequences that come along with a direction. Look, we've seen things happen over the years. We've jumped into gaming, we've jumped into tobacco, we've jumped into we're jumping into the hemp industry. There's a lot of things that we're bringing into our culture essentially as a part of economic development that we have to think about some of those unintended consequences. And I'm not just concerned about the challenges that we have with asserting our regulatory advantages as we do these things, but certainly making sure that we build a foundation on something that we can defend. Part of the conversations that we try to have here are to educate people. Look, I remember when tobacco first became a big thing across Native territories, there were many people who had no idea why we could do it. Why could we sell tobacco without New York State taxes on it? And where were the limits of that? As we've moved from selling a national American brand or a national Canadian brand to manufacturing ourselves, what were the changes in the laws that we were going to be challenged by? And I don't mean the laws that we need to abide by, but just that those laws are set there to restrict us. The question is, how can we push back? What's the rights that we have to push back on those things? See, these are the kinds of things that I try to address with the show. And look, it's not always going to be, the hard line, political conversation. Sometimes we lighten it up a little bit. We do have entertainers that join us. We do have musicians that join us. But frankly, even those are oftentimes, people among the activist community. But we try to lighten it up, and it isn't all serious. We try to make light of some of the things that I think are perhaps absurd, but absurd enough to laugh at. So I hope as you join me, as we have mixed up the format a little bit here, and catch our shows on a regular basis, that you will participate with us. Look, when I first established the program as Let's Talk Native, the other slogan that I tried to promote was let's join the conversation. Join the conversation. And my hope is that you will hear something in this program, whether it's from me or from a guest that I have, that's going to say something to you, and that'll encourage you to have that conversation. One of the best things that I've ever heard from somebody was somebody who perhaps listened to a program and then developed their own conversation about the topics we discussed, and then felt more comfortable confronting an issue when they were faced with that. So whether it was overhearing a conversation or in their workplace as they're working with non-natives, and they hear something that they feel now more empowered to confront. Because it's not just about the confrontation, it's about the education that comes with it. So every person who perhaps picks up one of these topics and picks up one of these issues and takes some ownership of it becomes empowered to be an advocate, to be an activist on that issue. So whether we're talking about environmental issues, radioactive contamination in Cattaraugus Creek, or stopping a pipeline that's coming through the area, or standing up to New York State over the thruway, over gaming, or anything else, or whether it's something that we do here to support a Native movement miles and miles away. These are the kinds of things that this program is geared towards keeping in the front of everybody's mind, so that we are more equipped. Look, we're not going to send a crew out to every event that takes place across across Turtle Island, but we can connect people, and that's the goal of part of this program, is to keep people connected, keep the conversation going, and keep us critically thinking about what we're facing. Look, we have our children to deal with. We have education issues. We have, again, I talked about missing and murdered Indigenous women. This is an issue that we not only need to confront, But we need to take some responsibility in how are we addressing our domestic violence issues on our territory, and how are we making sure that we're there to not just defend our women, but to prop our women up and give them the respect that they deserve. And on the flip side, how do we encourage both our sons and our daughters to live responsibly? This is the challenge, and this challenge goes at the core of our a core foundation for our future. Because if we are not taking or making responsible choices today, then it does impact not just the next generation, but the proverbial 7 generations. So stay with us. We will be doing, like I said, 3 half-hour programs per week. We will thoroughly go through a topic with each program, and if, like I said, if they extend to a series, then we'll do that too. But stay with us. Stay with us. Participate with us. We look for your comments. We look for your critiques, and we look for your support. And look, as we engage each other in various communities, whether you are a participant in this show or a guest on this show, or whether you just heard a topic that you need to talk to a friend or a family member over, keep the conversation going, keep the critical thinking going, and look, let's ensure that in the next 50 years, in the next 100 years, we will reclaim more and more of our identity, more and more of our distinction, and more control over our lives and over the direction that our families can go in. This is the challenge. We live in a time where it is almost undeniable that a country like the United States is showing its tattered edges. We can debate to how much of a decline the United States or even Canada is in, but we do see signs of it. We see it in many of these older countries. The question is, where does that leave us? Where does that leave us as we try to carve out our path for the future? It's not about us taking on the mighty United States or Canada or the Crown or anybody else. It's about what do we do to maintain who we are, our distinction, and our path forward to our future. We need to acknowledge the past, bring it to the present, and carry it to the future. That's our goal, and that's our responsibility. I think it's really easy to find comfortable places within the systems of oppression around us. And we see that. We see that happening. Many of our Native brothers and sisters in various places have adopted that philosophy. Well, go along to get along. Well, I think while some of that may be acceptable, I think we also have to realize that when we come to that place where we have to take a stand, it is really required that we take a stand. And we need to do it in a manner that is both grassroots, that is supported by the peoples of our communities, and something that when we have a conversation with our children and they ask, what did we do then? We can tell them what we did. And we can say it with pride and hopefully lay a stronger foundation so that when our children and our grandchildren face the same obstacles that we have, that they are not just as equipped, but better equipped to go forward. That's the goal of Let's Talk Native, is to keep us sharp, keep us informed, and I look forward to providing more conversation, more content, more information to you as we go forward. So I want to thank you for bearing with me on our 501st show, and look forward to going forward with each program. We'll see you next time. Thanks again. Yahweh.